What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for another episode of the UNC Football Show. And AJ, I'm coming on a little bit different this week. I think most people know I usually wear a collared shirt on here, but I figured bye week for the Tar Heels. They're relaxing a little bit. I can come in with a T-shirt on and relax a little bit too. Just switching it up.
Is that like a planned thing? You do that to?
No, you know what it was? I had this shirt on already, and I was trying
I wear tees sometimes just because I feel like it.
I don't mind the tee. Look, I'm just, for some reason, I'm just always a polo guy on these, but I had it on and I was like, I got to thinking and I was going to change in my polo that I have over here. And I was like, you know what? Bye week, man.
I've
Tar
got
Heels are relaxing.
4 on my chair
too, man. You know what I mean?
I've got 4 on my chair over here because sometimes we do, full disclosure, we do like 3 and back to back to back. We put different shirts on and make you guys think it's a different day.
Yeah.
And I've got an Orioles jersey over there too. So
yeah, I know.
But I'm
have to wear that one time.
People already think I flaunt the Orioles stuff too much.
Hey, I don't mind it, man. You got to show it off a little bit. It's your team. That's your team.
At least I've been a gracious winner. They were my guys when they stunk up the joint.
Yeah, you've been there through thick and thin, and I think that you're definitely the opposite from a bandwagon fan. I'll tell you that for free. So, but yeah, AJ, we're here for a bye week edition of the Carolina Football Show, and a few topics here to talk about. We also, as some people know, have been doing kind of an ACC this week in the ACC Football Show. We talk about this weekend's games. Not going to do that this week as a separate episode, but we'll tie that in a little bit later on in this one. Before we get into it, guys, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We're going to talk about them a little bit later on in the pod. Stay tuned for that. But a big thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode of the UNC Football Show. So, AJ, let's start off with this. Carolina 4-0 going into the bye week, feeling good about themselves, and no media availability this week as well. So like I said, Carolina kind of relaxing a little bit. Obviously we'll practice, but recovery, a big focus, getting a little bit healthier, a big focus as well. And that's always a plus during a bye week. So besides not having media availability this week, AJ, what can you let us in on in terms of what's going on at the Kenan Football Center this week?
Practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They're working on special teams. Max said the other night, Tuesday, they're going to hear about special teams.
Shocker, right? Yeah, shocker.
They did good things the other night, but I'll repeat this again. Mac has said many times, special teams aren't usually going to win you games, but they can cost you games. Mm-hmm. And they were fortunate they didn't cost them the other night because they thoroughly beat Pittsburgh in other areas. But they're working on that. This is also a great week to get young guys some reps and also some of the older guys that are new. Stick Lane. Mm-hmm. He's still getting caught up with the communication. Armani Chapman just getting more comfortable out there. And as far as the depth goes, Sebastian Cheeks did get on the field. Mac and Tommy Thigpen said last week that, he's about there. And he got 5 snaps. Maury Campbell got 5 snaps against Pitt. So I'd be willing to bet you that Cedric Gray's not getting a lot of reps this week. Power Rickle's not getting a lot of reps. And Sebastian Cheeks and Amari Campbell are getting a ton of reps. Deuce Caldwell's getting a lot of reps. So stuff like that. Offensively, I still think getting in sync, Drake's the 2 main guys he spent off season. When I say main guys, the top 2 targets, throwing to, one of them's not there and the other one just got back 2 games ago. So they still have a lot of rhythm stuff, the chemistry stuff to work on with the offense. But this is 3 days, do stuff, get a lot of young guys some work and be healthy, get healthier. And then the players get to go after they practice Thursday. I guess they have classes and then they can go home for a few days, but they got to be back on Sunday. Sunday will be a typical game week practice Sunday, off Monday, and they're back at it Tuesday as they get ready for Syracuse. So it also gives the coaches a chance to step back and do a little reevaluating on some things. And they may take a few things out of the playbook and just say, you're out of here, you're gone. Like they did the Wildcat a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then they may take a couple things over here and say, you know what, let's try this. Nice little shiny object. Let's go ahead and put that in there. See how that works. So they'll be a little bit different when we see them against Syracuse, but not tremendously different because they do most things well. And the things that they have struggled with at times, they have the personnel and the staff to fix those. And that's the thing I keep telling people. I was talking to someone earlier today when I was out getting my steps. I said, look, for the things that you don't like that you've seen, all of it is correctable. They have all the parts inside the Kenan Football Center and all the pieces to fix the things you don't like that you've seen at times. All of it can be fixed. There are a lot of teams out there that can't say that. I think this team in the past hasn't been able to say that, but they can say it now. And I think that's a big part of what this week's all about is they got plenty of intel. They played 4 quality programs so far. They know who they are. A lot of times you go into an open date, you may not totally know who you are yet because you haven't been tested that much. They've been tested. They know who they are. I think that this program, this team rather, its staff, its players, and at the place they are as they climb the ladder of improvement, they're in a great spot. And I think they know they're in a great spot, but there's been enough that to keep them focused, that the coaches kind of hit them over the head with and keep them dialed in. And I think that's where they are right now.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's great. The bye week comes at a great time in a lot of ways. Cause again, like we've talked about, you're a team right now that's 4-0. You're feeling good about yourselves. You're coming off a physical kind of tough start to the season. Every game in which Carolina played, there were no gimmies. So Carolina had to earn all of those victories. And now you're getting to get healthy a little bit. You're getting to, like you mentioned, go over some of those things that can still be worked on. Cause it feels like I think the theme, just to sum up kind of the first 4 games of this season, has been that this team has won games. They're undefeated, but there's still so many things that they can improve on. And they know that too. It's not just us. Obviously, of course, they know that too. And that's going to be a big focus going into this bye week. And then as they prepare for Syracuse next week as well. So again, talk about the great timing here. Cause I think when you're feeling good about yourself, but you've had this physical start to the season, being able to get a little bit rest and work on some of those weaknesses is a plus going into the stretch that Carolina has afterwards, which is 3 straight home games. Not a bad situation.
Think about Saturday night. 5 sacks allowed. A punt was blocked, and Pitt took over in the red zone. They allowed a kickoff return for a touchdown. They did a poor pooch sky kick, slash sky kick. That's tough to say. That
tongue twister right there.
That the Pitt player muffed, and Carolina didn't fall on it. They had an illegal block on a kickoff return. Now, they did some good things on special teams, but what I'm saying is you add the sacks into that, and they still won by 17 points at what is arguably the second best program in this conference the last 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. It was one of those games where, hey, we can feel like we've done something and go in there and not be ready and never really get our groove going. And they got their groove going. They shut them down after the first 2 series. Pittsburgh had 150 yards their last 10 offensive possessions and 3 offensive points. So what I'm saying is, I think they've been a C+ team for them. Everything is great. Every team should be graded on a curve, should be graded on what they should be, right? Mm-hmm. They've been a C+ team, and they're 4-0, and they have 3 wins over Power 5 teams by an average of 16.3 points a game. So the C+ aspect makes this great timing for the week off. They get rested. They've been going at this since August 3rd. So it's been 8 weeks. So they get the break, and then they close with 8 weeks, and they hope 9. They go to the ACC championship. That would be 9 straight Saturdays they would play. So it's right in the middle of their work. It's only a third of the way through the season, but for them, it's in the middle of their work. So it's perfect timing. Mm-hmm. And as I said a few minutes ago, the staff gets to, throw a few things out, add a couple of things, get some younger guys in there, and they get to look at this team and say, you guys are 4-0. You're number 15 in the country, and you've got a lot to improve on. So this should give them the motivation that, you know what, we could be pretty damn good. Because they can be. Because when you win by 17 on the road with the things I mentioned earlier, now a good team doesn't allow those things to happen that much. So they overcame it one night, one time. They don't want to try to have to do that again. But the fact that they did it and they won by 17 tells you that the team's got a very high ceiling, And this week is going to be really important, them getting to that ceiling, because they're going to need a couple more parts. They really need Stick Lane to be fully 100% caught up. And they need Campbell and Cheeks to be ready to play some, because you never know what's going to happen there at middle linebacker. You don't want one injury to derail everything, but I do think middle linebacker, the inside linebackers, and Drake, those are the 3 guys that they will have a very tough time replacing. Very tough time. Other guys will be hard to replace, but not nearly impossible to replace. I think those 3 right now are nearly impossible to replace. So they got to get those two going. Yeah,
depth's crucial going into the stretch that Carolina has coming up, because like you said, a long time with no break. So you got to be ready for that. Let's talk about, I guess, kind of the respect around Carolina right now, because it's obviously a team that's feeling good about themselves. Number 15 nationally right now in both the polls, undefeated, like we've mentioned many times in this show. And, I know Eric McLean, the guy who works for ACC Network, kind of came out and had them ranked 4th in the league, just as an example. There's other cases too, and I'm just using this as an example because it's one that was top of mind. And, behind the likes of Miami and I can't remember the two other. Do you remember the two other teams were, AJ? Top rated? Florida State, obviously, but
Florida State, Duke, Miami.
Yep.
And he took a beating for that too. Which,
I'm sure he did, especially from Carolina fans.
I don't think I don't think you can argue it. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I think those 4 are really good.
Yeah, 4 really good teams. There's a lot of undefeated teams in the league right now. Let's not forget that. So this is a conference so far, at least, that has started the season really well, and it seems like there's some good teams towards the top of it, Carolina being one of them. But when you look at kind of the talk, chatter, kind of reception that the Tar Heels are getting right now, do you think they're getting enough respect? I mean, I'll just go ahead and ask you.
I think they're in a good spot for this group. I think making a guy like Cedric Gray, a guy like Power Eccles, a guy like Drake May, a guy like Kamen Rucker, making them feel a little bit disrespected is a good thing for Carolina. Those guys will respond well to that. So I don't think they give a crap where they are in the rankings. I think the only thing they care about is their win-loss record, and the only thing they care about would be getting better. So keep winning games, get better. That's all they care about. Everything will take care of itself. Because if you look back at TCU a year ago, and we've used the TCU reference a few times, Carolina's ahead of where TCU was in the poll at this point. Does that matter? I don't know. I think there's still going to be a lot of chaos. This might be a year where 4 teams get into the CFP that aren't on the tips of people's tongues when they talk college football in June every year. And North Carolina would certainly be one of those teams. I'm not saying they're going to the CFP, but I think that they are positioning themselves to have an opportunity, if they continue to get better, that they can play very important football games in November and possibly in December. And if that's the case, they might be in the conversation depending on what else happens. So are they getting disrespected? No, I think they're probably where they need to be. Because what you're getting out there, a lot of people say, well, if you want to be more respected, don't go to double overtime at home to beat a G5. Well, that's an easy thing to say from 60,000 feet. But the dynamics of that are a lot different, as we know. That's why Carolina should never play App State again. It just doesn't they don't get anything out of it.
No, it's a lose-lose situation. 3
spots in the poll.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Totally. And App State's a really good program, and has a big game this weekend on the road. It's almost a must-win game for them. So they don't understand what that game is. To them, it's just some school that they can't find on a map, and you should clobber them. That's not the case. But they do have those 3 wins over P5s. Now, it would have helped Carolina's case with Minnesota if they wouldn't have gone to Evanston and lost to a terrible Northwestern team. That's a black mark. That doesn't help. But South Carolina did beat Mississippi State. We'll see how the Gamecocks do. But I think right now 15 is fine. If people are overlooking them, so what? It doesn't matter. Polls are more fun in football than in basketball because throughout time, they have meant more. Because back when I was first watching college football, the polls determined the champion. Yeah. That's how crazy it was. So the polls mattered. Now they don't matter because when the CFP stuff comes out, it has nothing to do with the poll, the AP and coaches poll. Just like when the NCAA selection committee sits down and they put together their tournament, it has nothing to do with what the rankings are. 0 to do with what you'll see teams that are ranked 18th in the country and they're a 9 seed. So clearly it's got nothing to do with it. Yeah. But I do think being a little disrespected for a while is okay for this club, but they're going to have plenty of opportunities to get respect. Miami on October 14th, Duke on November 11th, at Clemson on November 18th. And if they get to the ACC championship game, it's very possible an undefeated Florida State will be sitting there. Now you'll get all the respect in the world if you beat them then. So I don't think anybody in that building cares or is worried about it. Because if they win, they will take care of all of those things. Yeah, winning solves everything. It's one of my favorite sayings. And by the way, they're going to move up this week without playing. Yeah, with some of the matchups. I haven't looked at all the schedule around the country, but some of those teams are going to lose. They're just going to bump them up because that's what they do. Yeah, 100%. It'd be interesting to see where the Tar Heels end up free week for them. So just get to move up in the rankings and relax a little bit. Doesn't get any better than that. I'm just curious. We could talk about this, and we could actually ask. We'd like to ask questions every week. If they keep winning, how long does it take for them to get to the top 10? Because if they get to the top 10 at some point, this will be 3 of Mac's 5 teams that reach the top 10 at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And last year they got as high as 13. Because Mac gets dogged by some people. He gets dogged by some people on our boards. Previous coaches weren't getting him in the top 10. I'm just saying. And I'm not defending. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting how coaches are judged differently, just like programs are judged differently.
No, it's a real thing. No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think when you look at their upcoming schedule, I mean, you've got Syracuse and Miami on there, obviously, and Syracuse is going into this weekend's game, which we'll talk about in a second, at Clemson, undefeated. They come out that game.
Aren't they home?
At Syracuse. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And so if Carolina wins that game, I mean, who knows? I mean, it kind of depends, like you mentioned, what happens this weekend with the Tar Heels not playing. Do they move up a few spots in the rankings? And if they do, let's say Syracuse is coming into that game undefeated, Carolina beats them. I mean, that could potentially be it. I think if not that, you've got the Miami game coming up soon as well. If you beat them, I think Carolina's definitely in the top 10. I don't think there's any way they couldn't be, especially with how much love Miami's getting right now, too.
There are 6 teams in the ACC that are undefeated right now. Mm-hmm. Carolina's one of them. So there are 5 other teams.
It's a good league.
And they play Syracuse, they play Miami, they play Duke. Mm-hmm. And if they get to the ACC championship game, and they might play a 4th, which would be Florida State. So they've got
opportunities. Yeah. Yeah. The opportunities are there. 100%.
Yeah. So if you're a Tar Heel fan and you're worried about being disrespected right now, you're not being talked about, don't worry about it. The nation talked about them plenty a couple weeks ago for good reasons and bad reasons, but you got talked about. If they surface back up in October when other teams are falling and no longer discussed, that's when you want to be talked about more than in September anyway.
Yeah, no, 100%. I wouldn't be worried about that right now. And again, I agree with you. I think Carolina will perform better with the fact they are going under the radar a little bit. I think it kind of fits them and what they're trying to do this year. So AJ, before we talk a little bit about this weekend's schedule in the league, I do want to give a thank you to our sponsors. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And guys, you ever find that as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed or at home at inopportune times? And guys, it turns out that one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk through them. Therapy gives you a place to do that so you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. AJ, I can relate to this a little bit. They're talking about, laying in bed before you go to sleep and your mind starts racing, thoughts start racing a little bit. I'll tell you what, you come home from a game, covering a game, I can't go to sleep. I know you have this issue too. Even if it's an afternoon game, get home a little bit late, you get in bed, thoughts start racing, hard to kind of calm down a little bit after going through the gauntlet of covering a game for 6+ hours. I can relate to that big time. So therapy is a
when
great
life
way.
Gets tough.
Yeah.
Or when life gets tough.
Of course.
When my wife almost died. My wife almost died the day before the ACC championship game last year, and she demanded I go. And then she demanded I go to Blacksburg the next day to cover the basketball game.
I remember that.
And I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
So, and we all have that stuff. And it would, for a long time, she still hadn't fully recovered, but, so people have stuff they have to talk about. They have to.
Oh, 100%.
They have to use an organization like BetterHelp for a lot of reasons. I didn't know about them at the time. Mm-hmm. I just kind of fought through it, but maybe there are times where you need to use something like that.
Oh, of course there is, man, especially when you're going through tough times like we all do. And like you mentioned, there's just a lot of times when you get in bed and you can't fall asleep. Your thoughts starts racing, a lot of negative things going on in your life, things that are stressing you out, making you anxious. But therapy can help you get through that. And therapy help empowers you to be the best version of yourself, something most of us are trying to achieve. So guys, if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for 0 additional charges. Get a break from your thoughts, guys, with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THI. Again, that's betterhelp.com/THI to get 10% off your first month. Big thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this show. Okay, AJ, so real quickly, we're going to look at a few ACC matches. We're not going to talk all of these because this is not our typical show where we'll talk about every single one of them, but some of the bigger standout matchups, especially in the league this weekend. I'll just go ahead and run through them. Louisville at NC State. That's an interesting game for sure. Clemson at Syracuse, and Notre Dame plays Duke as well. I believe that one is in Durham. College Game Day is going to be there too. Yeah. So that's going to be a massive game in Durham. So it's three really interesting matchups. I know Notre Dame and Duke aren't technically league matchups, but still that's a massive matchup for a number of different reasons, especially when you look at how much love Duke's currently getting right now. They've had a really, really good start to the season, like North Carolina. So two undefeated teams in there as well, AJ. I think Louisville at State's a really intriguing matchup. Can State maybe pull off an upset there? I think that could potentially happen, especially being in Raleigh. You never know what could go on there. And Clemson at Syracuse is the matchup that I think Carolina fans are going to be watching the most. I think that's the one they're intrigued about. We talked about it a little bit. Can't remember if it was during our Three Things video or during our football show last week about how you kind of have to pay attention to these matchups a little bit, especially like Carolina, who's coming off a bye week and will be going in to play Syracuse, as Syracuse coming off a really emotional and tough game against Clemson, because it always is. So I think Carolina fans will definitely be tuning into that one. But thoughts on those three matchups, AJ? Because I think compared to last week, right there, some exciting matchups right there. We didn't see a ton of those last week, as we talked about.
Yeah. Those are three really intriguing matchups. I'll start with the Friday night game, Louisville and NC State. I don't think we know what Louisville is right now. Excuse me. I don't think we know what Louisville is right now.
No, I don't think so.
They've been pretty good, but what have they been pretty good against? I mean, Indiana in Indianapolis, it was a neutral crowd, a split crowd, basically. I don't know. That was a nice win for the league because it's a road win at the Big Ten, but I don't know how much it measures individually. This is a really big game for NC State. The Wolfpack pulled one out last week. They have some offensive issues, or I don't know. I think we're going to find out a lot about the Wolfpack, maybe more than we will Louisville in this game. And Carolina plays NC State. So if you're a Carolina fan, I know you don't want to hear me say this, but you want a game against NC State to matter as much as possible. Yeah. So you probably would like the Wolfpack to win that game. Mm-hmm. Clemson at Syracuse on Saturday. This game, think about poor Syracuse. Clemson at home, it'll be full.
Yeah, we've talked. I think we've talked about this. Maybe
and then they go to Florida State. Mm-hmm. So, best case scenario for UNC is Syracuse gets a win. They're feeling great about themselves because you know what happened last year when they felt great about themselves. Yeah. Then they come to Chapel Hill, and that'll get Carolina's attention big time.
Of course.
So, I think if you make the Syracuse win really valuable, that's better long-term for UNC because they're going to go to Clemson, and winning there, if they do, will carry plenty of cachet no matter what the Tigers are at that point. So if you can bolster Syracuse more, and Clemson's still going to be Clemson to some degree, of
course,
that's best case scenario for Clemson. I'm talking about the value of these games. And then the other one is
Notre Dame. Duke. Mm-hmm. At Duke.
Well, again, Carolina fans are going to despise me saying this, but you got to root for Duke in this one too. Mm-hmm. First of all, it'd be a great story. Second of all, Sam Hartman would lose the second straight week. I know there are a lot of Carolina fans that do not like him, and that would take care of Notre Dame, right?
Yep.
People pretty happy with that. But I just think it'd be a great story, and again, it gives more value to the Duke game.
Mm-hmm. You need that, especially you
need that. Mm-hmm. Look, if Miami could come into Chapel Hill unbeaten and Carolina beats them, Duke can be unbeaten coming to Chapel Hill in November, and Carolina beats them, and you still have some of the wins that they have on their resume, and you get Clemson to stay at the end of the year. That's how you build the best possible resume. If you're thinking long term about making the best case you can for inclusion into something significant, that's the way to do it. Last year's schedule, not as much. The 2015 team that got in the CFP conversation didn't have this kind of schedule. They had two FCS teams. They had a horrid Illinois team at home, and they had the loss to South Carolina, which wasn't a good team. This club already has a better resume and can have a significantly better resume by the time we get into late November. So that's what you have to root for, because this team is, trust me, they are playing for something significant in their minds. They believe that they are legitimate. They legitimately have a chance to do what TCU did last year. They believe that. Everybody in that building believes that. I've heard some of them say it. So watch the season that way. I think for Carolina fans, it'll be a lot of fun. They do it in basketball.
Yeah,
so
should do it in football too, especially during the bye week. I mean,
you know, exactly. In basketball, you root for your non-conference teams because you want to end up with a number one seed. You want the best seed possible, right? Mm-hmm. Apply the same logic to the football season, only that you have to lean heavily on your league foes because the weight of the schedule is heavy well, now in basketball, 20 games is pretty heavy that way too. So root for your opponents. That's all I say.
Yeah, I completely agree. Got to. You do. You really should, especially when a team like Carolina that wants to achieve big things this season. You need those wins to mean more. So root for the teams that Carolina's going to have to play eventually. Just real quickly, we're going to wrap this up in a second, but 3 out of conference matchups in terms of the non-conference teams that Carolina played earlier this season. Minnesota is at home to Louisiana. Expect that to be a win. You would think so. South Carolina at Tennessee. That's going to be a really tough trip for the Gamecocks. Didn't play Georgia, coming off a win over Mississippi State, which is good, but played Georgia a couple weeks ago close, weren't able to win that one. Trip to Tennessee is going to be another tough one for them to pull out. And then you got Appalachian State at home against Louisiana, at Louisiana Monroe. Another must-win game, honestly. When you look at how App gave it away against Wyoming late last week, they got to go in and win that game. That's going to be a big one, but it's going to be a tough one again on the road against them.
That would have been a nice win.
Yeah, it really would be. So
that would have been a really good win. Hey, don't sleep on Louisiana.
Yeah, good team. Good team. Traditionally in that Sun Belt,
recent years they've won it. In recent years they've won it Power 5 teams.
Yep.
So don't sleep on them. In Minnesota, I mean, that was a dreadful loss last week. If you're Minnesota, and now you go back to the Eastern Michigan game, you get pummeled by Carolina. Well, almost pummeled. You get beaten soundly by Carolina and you lose Northwestern. Yeah. So I'm sure Minnesota fans aren't too thrilled about PJ right now. And this is an enormous game for them. They got to win that game, and that's a losable game because Louisiana has a winning culture, or enough of a winning culture they could win a game like that. Yeah, no, it's fascinating to look into those two. I was surprised Gamecocks last week, but you think the Gamecocks have a chance? Either. I think the Gamecocks have a chance. Spencer Rattler's been really good this year. He has really. And if really you good could go in and push Georgia between the hedges well into the fourth quarter. We saw a little exposure here recently with Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So maybe Tennessee's not all that. Yeah, it's possible. And South Carolina's Joe Milton got talked about more, but South Carolina's got the better quarterback, and that gives them a chance to win. I think that's going to be a close game. And I think the Gamecocks have a chance. And if South Carolina wins that game, man, that's huge for UNC. Oh, would it be ever? That would be great for North Carolina. So definitely be rooting for South Carolina this weekend. Like, you can be a Gamecock fan, guys. How exciting is that? How fun does that sound? You could be a Blue Devil fan, Wolfpack fan, Gamecock fan. I think Carolina fans should go to Duke friends' houses for watch parties for Notre Dame in town and cheer for the Blue Devils. Wouldn't that be something? Oh, God, can you imagine, man? Hey, Chapel Hill, Durham, man. It's not far. 8 miles, something like that. It's not far. Easy drive to get on. How about a party? How about top of the hill showing the Duke game and everybody? Oh, can you imagine, man? Duke? Can you imagine? That will never happen. We've essentially told Carolina fans in this podcast to root for State, Duke, and who was the other one? South Carolina this weekend. That's never going to happen. And we didn't talk about UVA and Boston College. I would have told them to root for UVA in that one too. Yeah. So there's a couple other games. There are people with THI pins right now, or THI cushions that are sticking pins in them right now. Oh, 100%. Yeah, they're clicking off this video. I probably clicked off it a long time ago, to be honest with you, but that's just how it goes. Unsubscribing. Yeah. Thumbs down. Turning off that notification bell too. They don't care anymore, man. You know how it goes. So AJ, I'm sick of that. AJ and Jacob, they keep telling us to root for Duke. And State, I don't know which one's worse. I'd be interested to ask a Carolina fan, especially football wise, because the hatred runs a little bit deeper football wise. Football would be State, basketball obviously be Duke. I think so. I think you're 100% right on that. And on that note, AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this show up. Again, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Big thank you to them. Links in the description below to head on over there and sign up. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate y'all watching as always. Make sure you like. Make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the notification bell too. We'll be back next week for the Syracuse edition of the preview edition of the UNC football show. So stay tuned for that. And as always, keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Thanks.